Hi, my name is Rupert and I'm Head of Insight and Communications at Brego. Welcome to the latest Brego Leisure Intel monthly broadcast, in which I'm going to review what happened in the leisure markets during January 2026. I'm going to summarise activity in the touring home, holiday home and motorhome and camper verticals during January, along with a short summary of the economic and political position that has influenced consumer behaviour in the UK leisure sector during the month. So without further ado, let's get going with the economy. So January was a much better month from an economic perspective, with some positive indicators that have helped reinforce consumer confidence and give some support to retail activity across markets all across the UK, to be fair, not just the leisure sector. As predicted, though, the inflation rate did increase marginally, moving up to 3.4% from 3.2%, although generally speaking, this was expected. Now, predictions are that this will now decrease as 2026 unfolds, starting with a drop of 3% in January, and that will be announced on Wednesday, February the 18th, so we'll just have to wait and see. Now, as far as the bank base rate of interest is concerned, we did not enjoy a further drop, although it was a close call within the Monetary Policy Committee, with them almost shaving another 0.25% off the rate, which is now expected to happen next month. And to be fair, that will give great help to the economy and to consumer confidence. And on consumer confidence, the index improved by 1 point to -16, and the business confidence rate improved markedly from -31 to -19, which is really good news for all of us, we hope, going further forward. In addition, the average cost of a litre of unleaded fuel dropped to £1.32 from £1.36 the previous month, further helping to ease the cost of living. And that's what we all need, because if we have that, then we're going to be able to be in a position to spend more money. Now, unfortunately, the average mortgage rate has remained steady at 4.3% for a 2-year mortgage, which was kind of expected to come down, but for political reasons, it stayed where it is, and there is still a little unrest in this sector, stalling any good news. Whilst on the political topic, the Prime Minister has been under growing pressure of late, with questions being asked over both his authority, but more importantly, his decision-making ability. There have been plenty of U-turns, and that is not what we like to see. This is primarily due in recent weeks to the Epstein furore and the subsequent Mandelson disaster, neither of which have helped the government as a whole. On top of this, we've had the behaviour of the American administration, which has also remained cause for concern, because it influences what is happening in the UK and the kind of decisions that the government are able to make, and also lenders and so forth. So the UK used leisure market, and here we're going to be using insight from the Brego Whole Market data set, and we're going to work through each of the different market verticals just to let you know what's been going on. So we'll start with touring homes. Total adverts increased by 14.3%. Yes, 14.3. That's off the back of a 10.9% decrease in December. Now, normally that might mean that there's been a slow sales month, but the reality is that with the start of 2026, sales were up 62.4%. Okay, they were 31.5% down in December, but they went up 62.4%. And it is worth noting that sales from December 2024 to January 2025 did show a slightly better increase at 70.5%. But let's not turn this down. This is a good start to the year. Two-berth touring home adverts increased by 12%. That's in the face of a 9.9% decrease in December. And four-berth adverts increased by 13.1% against a 9.3% decrease in December. So it's clear that dealers are now advertising more stock as the market begins to ramp up. Now, that is to be expected, and we should hope that that continues in February as well. There are some other reasons that that will take place as well. We'll cover those later off. So we know sales increased by 62.4%, but the market share split was as follows. So two berths increased by 24.5%, and four berths by 56.9%, and five and six berths by 102.2%. So much smaller volume of actual volume of caravans, but let's be clear, it seems that the family buyer is coming back to the market, which is good because it shows that the season is beginning to pick up. As a comparison to January 2025, two berths were up by 72.7%, four berths up by 60.4%, and five and six berths were up by 94.2%. So some good growth last year as well, but interesting that we haven't seen the same growth for two berths in January 2026 as we did in 2025. From a days to sale perspective, they increased just marginally, though, to 77.3 from 76.4, which is just under a day worse than it was in December. Now, that is positive, particularly given that we just come out of the slow festive period, which many might have expected to have seen that the average days to sale increase further. So it shows that the dealers are being able to churn some of that older stock. The average used touring home sale price went up by 7.5%, and that increased to 17,720. For further context, the average two-berth price increased by 10.6%, the four-berth increased by 4.2%, and the 5 and 6 berth caravans increased by a nominal 0.09%. But overall, good increase in sale price, 7.5%, and that means that we are selling more expensive caravans rather than just the older, perhaps more poorer condition caravans. When we move to holiday homes, we can see that total adverts increased by 27.9%. Actually, they did increase in December as well, but by 3.8%. But 27.9% is quite a big boost. And for context, the change last year in January 2025 in comparison to December 2024, there was a decline of 20.8%. So we can see this as a positive move. Parks are advertising more stock. Maybe there's more of the units in the marketplace. Now, sales, and that's indicated by the number of adverts we see removed in January, that spotlights an increase of 151.7%. Now that's huge. It sounds pretty special given the change last year was actually a decline of 52.5%. So we've definitely got something shifting in the marketplace for this year. We have to take this again as a very positive start to the year. Two-bed sales were up by 93.1%, and three-bed sales increased by 59.3%. So some healthy increases there. So this big hike is probably due to the market opening up, ready for 2026. And there are, of course, more parks reopening the sales centres after that quiet festive period. From a days to sale perspective, though, we have seen them increase from 45 to 83.9. Now, that is a significant increase of 38.9 days, and that's come off the back of a 16.7-day increase in December. So really things did slow down. Perhaps that's why we're seeing a greater increase in the number of adverts, because they're not selling as quickly. But having said that, we do know that the sales went up by 151.7%. So this will be due to a mix of demand and, of course, reduced advertising periods because of the festive period and, of course, the holiday park closures over that Christmas time. Looking in more detail is where you'll find out exactly what's going on, and using the Brego Insight tool that you'll find inside the platform will give you a clear picture of where those variances lie and perhaps why. And it is fair to say that they do vary significantly by the age and type of unit. So it really is worth exploring that in some more detail. Now, the average used holiday home price increased by 43.6%. That's off the back of a 15.2% increase last month. That takes the average sale price for a holiday home to $30,388 from $23,089. And that's a healthy increase. And that confirms that there are more expensive units that were more popular during January. Now, don't forget, pricing can vary wildly at this time of year, depending on what adverts are actually online, although we've seen that big increase, and of course, the somewhat sporadic demand. So for motorhomes and campers, total adverts increased by 6.1% during the month, and that's off the back of a 2.7% decline during December. Now, that confirms that the dealers have increased inventory levels and are also re-advertising stock that perhaps they took off advertising platforms during the quieter months, not wanting to waste their money. So they're less choosy about what they want to advertise. They know there are more people in the market and they want to make the most of it. In addition, sales in January increased by 29.1%. That's off the back of a 25.4% decline in December when compared with the previous month. And that really means that we're bringing levels pretty close back to where they were effectively in November. Now, the split was an increase of 28.4% for motorhomes and 21.7% for campers, which is interesting because that kind of almost matches exactly the declines we saw in the previous month. But generally speaking, this is a good position to be in, which shows that the market is strengthening and building. Trade adverts bounced back with a 5.6% increase after a 0.8% decline. And this is for similar reasons as we saw in the other market verticals, not wanting to advertise lots of stock and have high costs when the market is quiet. Private adverts really surged with a 13.8% increase, but that is off the back of a 40% decrease in December. So we're starting to build that up again, and that will increase as we go into February and March as the consumer decides that they want to think about changing their own motorhome or camper before the real holiday season comes to start. From a days to sale perspective, there was a good improvement as the days to sale decreased by 16.6 to 86.4. They were at 103, so we've had quite a good step in the right direction, and actually a fair result given the time of year, because quite often you will notice, and we see it in the other market verticals, that because of that slow period over Christmas and the New Year, that adverts tend to age whilst they just sit there not being sold. The average sale price for used motorhome and camper dropped by 16.4%, which is interesting. So it means that people are going for the more budget-friendly options, and that dropped to 52,969 from just over 60,000. So definitely the cheaper versions that are more important. Or is that a tail off in the very high-end marketplace, which is kind of dragging that average price down? So in summary, for January 2026, this is what happened in the leisure sector. January was a much better market than the dealers and parks experienced in December, which is traditional, although this year it looks as though it may be stronger than many had expected. As the volume of adverts across all market verticals increased, so has footfall at the dealers and the parks as well. And of course, some of those that were closed over that festive period are now reopening and getting their sales operations up and running. Touring caravans enjoyed a marked increase in adverts and a very good increase in sales. A 7.5% increase in average sale value also indicated there was demand for perhaps the higher end units. For holiday homes, the increase in sales looked dramatic at 151.7%, but remember, this was coming from a very low base, but nonetheless, it was most welcome, specifically as the average sale price also jumped by 43.6%, showing that there is interest in better quality holiday homes. For motorhomes and campers, the uplift in the volume of adverts was the lowest of the market verticals in the leisure sector, and this is kind of to be expected in some respects, as the motorhome and camper market tends to still be quite resilient over the quieter winter months. So it's still a positive picture, though. With such a good start to 2026, the sector can now start to feel greater excitement for the coming weeks, right? So as I record this, the sector is almost ready to enjoy the National Caravan, Camping and Motorhome Show at the NEC, which starts on February the 17th, and that will run through until the 22nd of February. And that's going to give the first indications as to whether the consumers have an appetite to spend money on new leisure homes and products. Look, I'm sure you found this an invaluable update in an exciting time as we anticipate growth in sales as the leisure sector heads towards a more active period. If you want or need more detail, be sure to read the Brego Monthly Leisure Insight Report. Now, that can be found on the Brego LinkedIn page and also the Brego website. Or, of course, you can reach out to me directly and I can forward it to you. We also have now started to post insight and updates on our YouTube channel, and that's called Brego Official. So just look for Brego-Official on YouTube and you'll find us. So finally, I just want to reiterate that if you want to improve your market insight and your understanding of the nuances in today's leisure sector, then you need to speak to me or the Brego sales team. Andy, Safi and Nick would be delighted to show you how the Brego pricing and market data will help you to improve not only your understanding of the market, but ultimately increase profitability for your business. And that's what it's all about. Remember, they don't bite, they're here to help and empower you. I'll see you soon. Thank you.